I right now? Is this real life? Or is this just fantasy? As you can see, Round the Clock Frights has found a new home. I have recently moved to a new house with my wife. I just finished setting up this new filming corner. I got all of my awesome horror merch here behind me. Russell Scarecrow is excited to be on camera again, as you can tell. Actually, I think he's kind of trying to hog the screen. I might want to move him over a little bit because he's quite the scene stealer. But yeah, I have some of my figures behind me. And I actually like the way this setup looks, to be honest. So yeah, obviously some big changes are happening to the channel, guys. I am no longer living with Thor and her husband. I am on my own now. I guess you could say that I'm flying solo. So welcome to the new location. I'm excited to celebrate the month of Halloween with you guys. By the way, guys, happy Halloween! It is the most wonderful time of the year. I would sing if I had the courage to, but I won't because I don't want to disturb my new neighbors. But yes, guys, I'm going to be delivering some very exciting videos throughout the month of October. I got some really big things planned. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about this October is a movie called Cell, which came out in 2016, and it is considered to be one of, if not the very worst, Stephen King movies ever made. I'm here to say that is not true. In fact, I have seen a number of Stephen King films that are way worse than this. I can actually name a few off the top of my head. There's Maximum Overdrive, which came out in the 80s. Stephen King himself directed that, but apparently he was on drugs the entire time, so he doesn't remember, making that movie at all. In fact, he said it was a very horrible experience, and since then, he has not directed another movie, although he has written some other very entertaining screenplays, including Sleepwalkers, which is one of my favorite bad movies of all time. Also, the Carrie remake that came out in 2013, which was just very bland and very forgettable. I consider that worse than 2016 Cell. And, okay, last night, I watched a little remake called Firestarter, from this year in fact, starring Zac Efron and the little girl from It Chapter 2, the one who gets devoured by Pennywise under the bleachers, and despite it having a promising start, it was incredibly bland. It was by the members, and Firestarter is probably the worst film I've seen this year. Beat out such modern classics as Morbius and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot on Netflix. I was very disappointed with the Firestarter remake, and last but not least, the film that I consider to be the worst Stephen King adaptation, Shawshank Redemption. I'm totally kidding, please don't shut this video off. Actually, a little film called Graveyard Shift. Graveyard Shift is unpleasant, it's disgusting, it makes me feel gross. It was a film that I watched on a whim, and I never want to watch again. So Graveyard Shift is a far worse film than Cell. Cell, if you look on many websites, talking about the very worst Stephen King films ever made, Cell is usually in the bottom 5 or 3, and in some instances, it's considered to be the worst Stephen King film ever made. But, okay. So, obviously, I went in with some quote-unquote high expectations for this film, but I'm going to defend this film a little bit because, as stated, it is not the worst Stephen King film ever made. In fact, it's unintentionally hilarious. There are so many scenes in this movie where I was just cackling with laughter. In fact, I was laughing so hard, I'm pretty sure I was making the wall shake. I'm pretty sure the neighbors thought that a lunatic had moved into this house. So yeah, I'll talk about some of my favorite unintentionally hilarious moments in this film here in a little bit. It has likable enough characters, including John Cusack, Samuel Jackson, and Isabel Furman, which, by the way, I reviewed Orphan First Kill. I did that review a couple of weeks ago. If you want to check out that video, it's also on this channel. And honestly, the idea is decent enough. The idea of cell phones turning everyone into rage-filled zombies is a pretty decent idea. And it's intriguing and kind of unnerving. And I haven't read the novel, but I assume, much like countless other Stephen King works, this idea comes across much better on page because you're using your imagination to fill in the gaps when you have a motion picture you have an artist, creating all these sequences for you. So you can't use your imagination at all because film is very literal. What you see is what you get. And if the filmmaker doesn't do a good enough job, an idea like this could end up being unintentionally hilarious. And oh boy, it doesn't quite work as a film, guys. And it's not a very competent movie. It was directed by the dude who gave us Paranormal Activity 2, one of the greatest modern horror sequels. Can't say that with a straight face. Okay, so I'm gonna break this thing down for you. So the opening sequence, it's not a terrible start, despite some hilarious acting from the extras and some very shoddy CGI work. Oh man, I haven't seen CGI this refined since I went to film school. And you had a bunch of film students creating their own, visual effects sequences. Man, the CGI in this movie, my god. Anyway, so we meet John Cusack. He is our protagonist, and he's an artist. He creates illustrations for graphic novels, and at the beginning of the movie, he's landed some sort of big gig, and he's on the phone with his beloved wife, who he has recently divorced, and he wants to get home to see his kids. So typical, start, I guess. I mean, you have a hero who is divorced, and the apocalypse is about to happen. We haven't seen that before. Actually, yes, we have. We've seen that scenario play out many times before. But anyway, John Cusack's phone dies, and he has to use a payphone, which I don't know if you kids know, but back in the day, we had things called payphones. Payphones were things that didn't connect to Wi-Fi. You actually had to, insert coins into a slot to use payphones. Isn't that mind-blowing? They should make a horror movie called Payphone, or Payphones. They did make a movie called Phone Booth, directed by Joel Schumacher, which was actually pretty decent. Anyway, so what ends up happening is that everyone gets a call on their cell phone, and once they answer, this pulse goes through their, I guess this pulse enters their brains, and it makes them turn into these rage-filled zombies. I'm just gonna call them zombies because that's exactly what they act like. Sure, they're not technically dead, they're not undead, but they act like your typical zombies. They're running around like crazy. They're attacking random people. They are screaming hilariously, by the way. Like, they sound like Tim Allen in Home Improvement, just These are some of the funniest zombies I have ever seen in a motion picture. Oh my goodness. So this opening is a very entertaining start. John Cusack is trying to leave the airport. He's trying to get out there safely while all these people are going berserk. Oh man, the visuals in this film, as I admitted earlier, they're often atrocious. There's a shot where you see this plane crashing, and oh my god, the plane doesn't look realistic at all. It looks like someone ripped a PNG off the internet and just had it move, on camera. It doesn't look in the least bit convincing, and the explosion is even worse. Many modern blockbusters use way too many CGI explosions. Man, you should see the CGI explosions in this thing because they are... I've seen student films with better visuals than this. In fact, I've not to toot my own horn, but I've made short films with better visuals than this. So the rest of the plot, John Cusack, he ends up meeting up with Samuel L. Jackson. He meets him on an underground subway, and Samuel L. Jackson is this crusty old subway driver, and he leads John Cusack back to his apartment where they meet up with Isabel Furman, a young girl who just murdered her mother, and it becomes a road trip of sorts. The three of them hit the road to survive the impending apocalypse and reunite with John Cusack's family, even though we know there's no hope of John Cusack's family actually being alive. I mean, come on, it's a horror movie. So the biggest problem with this film is that apart from the initial idea, this is an incredibly standard apocalyptic thriller. I mean, the story beats, we've seen these story beats in numerous other, zombie apocalypse films. It takes cues from films such as 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, I would argue World War Z in some instances. It's old. You have this small group of survivors, trekking across the country. They might make a stop at, a rundown diner, which they do at one point, and it's ridiculous because one of the actors at this diner looks like Richard Nixon. And I thought that might have been the point, that these were supposed to be like celebrity impersonators, but this dude just looks like Richard Nixon for some reason. And, you have all those typical shots of, the streets being empty, cars might be on fire, there's debris and dust everywhere, and, zombies are running amok, or, they might be chasing after, human survivors. It's just, this film is filled with scenarios we've seen on dozen other occasions. So, this plot is really nothing new.
No, sir, I didn't like it.
Okay, so did I mention this film is unintentionally hilarious? I honestly can't remember the last time I laughed at a film this hard, especially a film as straight-faced as this, which makes it even funnier because this film is so delusional. It thinks it's telling this grand, epic apocalypse tale, but there are just so many sequences where I was just getting like a young schoolboy. So let me tell you about some of my favorite funny bits in this movie. So there's a scene where John Cusack and the others are staying at this ritzy boarding school. The headmaster is played by Stacy Keach, and they see this large group of zombies just laying on the grass, like they're just laying down like inside this stadium, I think it was, and there's this opera music playing in the background, and I guess the music is actually coming out of their mouths, but they come up with a bright idea to spray this flammable liquid all over the zombies, and they're going to accomplish this by driving this truck through the crowd of zombies. So you get this sequence where, John Cusack is running over, this crowd of zombies, and just the opera music is playing in the background, like, whoa, and oh my god, it is so funny. It reminds me of that episode of South Park where, they have to go through the crowd of hippies and they create this giant drill and they just end up plowing through this crowd of hippies. That's what this sequence reminds me of. It is so funny. It just had me howling with laughter. At the very end, when John Cusack goes to rescue his missing son, he does so in an ice cream truck. And apparently in the novel, it was just like a regular van or truck. In this movie, it's an ice cream truck. So you just see, John Cusack, driving, intensely towards this, group of zombies in an ice cream truck. And it is just, my abs definitely hurt while watching this movie. It really gave me some good laughs. And there are moments where you see like these zombies with their mouths hanging open like this. Oh! There's no way to film that without it looking funny because the zombies, their mouths are literally just hanging open like, oh! It looks like they're trying to squeeze out a painful turd. It looks like they all have hemorrhoids, and they're just trying to, to drop a deuce at the same time. Just, in the opening scene, you have all those extras running around acting like total maniacal idiots, just screaming like, I don't know, screaming like animals. It's just, oh man. As a filmmaker, you just have to step back and wonder, is this gonna look good in the final edit? I don't know what the director was thinking. So yeah, the film, as mentioned, does have a couple of redeeming merits, and there is actually a scene where one of the main characters does die, and I honestly got a little bit upset at that. I actually liked this character. I mean, this film has been out for 6 years. I don't care about spoilers. It's Isabelle Fuhrman. Isabelle Fuhrman ends up dying like in the middle of this movie, and honestly, I got a little upset. I thought she was a decent enough character, so when she died, I was a little bit sad. And, some of the shots were decent, although the cinematography overall was pretty amateurish. There's this one shot where you see John Cusack, Samuel L. Jackson, and Isabelle Fuhrman walking, down the road, and, it's kind of at this low angle, and you have, snow, falling around them. It's a pretty decent shot. That's the only decent-ish shot I can think of at the moment. I'm sure there were others, but I can't remember off the top of my head. The ending to this film is pretty lame. As mentioned, John Cusack goes to rescue his son, and, he finds this large crowd of zombies just walking around in a big circle. They're walking around this giant radio tower, I think it was, and long story short, John Cusack, sees his son in the crowd. He tries to rescue him, but he gets these visions of him and his son walking to safety. But it turns out John Cusack has been infected as well. So the last shot of the movie, you see this really poorly rendered shot of John Cusack just walking among a crowd of zombies, and that's it. It kind of ends with a whimper, not a bang. So yeah, the ending, bit of a letdown. Stephen King isn't always known for his satisfying endings, and this was probably one of the lamer endings I've seen in a while. The filmmaking is pretty amateurish. I mean, my god, most of the film is, handheld, which, oh my god. Unless you really know what you're doing, don't shoot your entire film handheld, because it's obnoxious, it's annoying, it's irritating, it got under my skin. I sometimes get motion sickness from watching found footage films because the goddamn camera won't stand still, but I think the reason I was okay with this was because, an actual movie has a bunch of edits, so you're not focusing on one shaky shot for too long. But man, the cinematography was annoying, and the editing was also pretty bad at times. There were times where I couldn't tell, who was where, or, where the action was, or the action was, edited so quick I could barely tell what was going on. So yeah, pretty amateurish, but I don't know, guys. I guess I didn't find this to be an abysmal piece of garbage. Speaking of pieces of garbage, apparently Harvey Weinstein was involved in the making of this film, and yeah, there were some behind the scenes troubles. Apparently, in post-productions, they didn't contact Stephen King or John Cusack at all. In fact, they completely, ignored them. So I'm sure Harvey Weinstein or one of the producers got their, grubby little claws on the final edit of this movie. Also, apparently, before this film was even in production, I guess Eli Roth was approached to direct this movie. As some of you might know, I'm not the biggest Eli Roth fan, but at the very least, the filmmaking probably would have turned out better, if he had been behind the camera. So, yeah. If he had directed this movie, it probably would have ended up a little bit better. But then again, Eli Roth doesn't always create the most likable or compelling characters, so I don't know, man. Eli Roth, he's made some decent-ish films, so I don't know if the film would have ended up much better if he had directed it. But yeah, this is just one of those films that took years to release. I guess it was finished in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, but it didn't get released until 2016. So it's one of those instances, but, overall, guys, I found Cell to be one of the more unintentionally hilarious horror films I've seen in recent memory. There are long stretches where it does get a little bland, a little boring. You're just kind of sitting around these characters as they talk solemnly to one another, like they're out of an M. Night Shyamalan movie. But I didn't despise it. I didn't hate this film. I've seen plenty of other Stephen King films that I hated more. One Stephen King film I forgot to mention, 2017's The Dark Tower, which didn't have much of anything to do with the books. Oh man, The Dark Tower was pretty abysmal. That film was a huge waste of money and time, which is sad because Idris Elba could have been a decent Roland. But yeah, that film was just trash. Anyway, boils and ghouls, thank you so much for joining me in my discussion of 2016's Cell, often considered one of the worst Stephen King movies, although as I pointed out, that's not the case. So, thank you again, guys. It's freaking October, man. I mean, we got so much to celebrate. I mean, spooky season is here. What are you guys up to? What are you doing to celebrate, the Halloween season? I would love to know. Leave your comments down below in the comment section, and please check out some of our other videos, guys. As I stated, we got some big things in the works. I actually have one project that I've been collaborating with some friends on. Something I hope to finish in the near future. I can't wait to get that out to you guys. But yes, guys, enjoy the month of October. It's been a long year for many of us. Us horror fans, we deserve it. So get out there and have some fun, guys. Thank you so much again. Happy Halloween. Stay safe and stay scary, boils and ghouls. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe because at the very least, it'll make Russell happy. Do it for Russell Scarecrow. He's a good man. Although one of these days he's gonna do something, and that'll be the final straw. Take care, guys. Have a good one. Bye.